What's up, y'all? Let's talk about the importance of homeownership. We've got three very distinguished guests, the first one being the guy, the handsome devil that's going to talk to you right now. But we're going to take the next hour and go over the importance of homeownership. All three of us are very, very big advocates of homeownership. We'll learn a little bit about us here shortly. I'll go first. My name is Nate. I am a branch manager here at UMortgage. I have been in the mortgage industry for a little over 10 years now. Purchased my first house at 23. I'm on my third house right now. I'm a huge believer in just the power of homeownership when it comes to not only creating some kind of family stability, but also increasing wealth. And I'm also kind of a little internet famous, apparently. Not sure how that happened, but it did. Rebecca, you go next.
So I'm Rebecca Richardson. I have been a loan originator, loan officer for 20 years. I'm based out of the Carolinas and lend in almost 30 states. I started my journey being a loan officer shortly after buying my first house, which was a negative experience. So I still remember what that felt like. And a lot of what I do is to try to help other homeowners have a more positive experience and feel well informed as far as what their choices are and what the process is going to be like.
All right, Matt Gougé, affectionately known as Matt the Mortgage Guy. Find me on YouTube and other platforms. Says 17,000 YouTube subscribers. Happy to report we're above 18,000 now. And my thing has always been empowering people, through education about homeownership. Bought my first house at 26. Own 6 pieces of real estate now, 14 doors. And if a public school guy like me can get out there and create some family wealth and stability, through real estate, I think anybody can do it. And so it's just a matter of sharing what we've learned and what we know across the interwebs. And I think we're all aligned on that. So we're excited to share some of that with you guys today.
Awesome. Let's go over a little bit like, what is it that we do? Like, what is a home loan originator? If you had to give your 15-second elevator pitch, Matt, we'll start with you, work our way backwards. How would you describe our role in the role that that the consumer can feel, like what role do we play in their home buying experience?
Right, yeah, and everybody gets emotional and excited about the house, but they need a loan, right? And so we're basically the guy that's helping them get that loan, because whether it's 3% down, 5% down, or 20% down, the bank's putting up the rest, and so we're helping you get that money and get that financing, and guiding you through that process, trying to make it easy.
Rebecca?
So what I describe to people is my job is partially one big algebra equation, and the other part is a Rubik's Cube, because basically we get all the pieces and parts of what somebody's preferences are and their details, income, assets, all of that. And then we help them come out and get it in order and get them what they want, which is the home, but we need the loan to get the home.
So my social handles used to be mortgages are boring. So I tell people that we do the boring part of the home buying process. We're kind of like the offensive lineman in the sense that like we're really important, but we kind of go like forgotten. But we also work, according to the slide deck, of course, we work hand in hand with real estate agents, and we help home buyers determine their budget. We help come up with their overall strategy, whether that be to put, hey, you can put this amount down, you can put this amount down, you can use this program. So we are there. It's kind of like this hybrid of wealth planner versus real, and also like real estate expert. I know we're not supposed to use that word, but we're going to use it. But really what all three of us love to do, and Matt touched on this earlier, we love to educate people on not only the process, but also the strategies and different things that they can do to tweak the numbers so that you can find a house or a home that fits your budget and your needs, your short-term, long-term goals. So that was a little bit more than 15-second pitch, but we'll go from there.
I was trying to stick to the rules, so but whatever. No, if we're gonna go full script, let's go.
Rebecca knows the most words, so we're gonna let her describe what a mortgage is.
Great, thanks for handing it up to me. So a mortgage is what a lender, bank, mortgage company, it's all basically the same in the sense of that's where you go to get a loan to purchase a home. So however much the home is being sold for, if you're putting a down payment, the remainder is going to be in the form of a mortgage. For the majority of people, when they're getting a mortgage, that is going to be paid out over 30 years. So as a result, then that is going to be based off of your interest and based off how much you borrowed then calculates the mortgage payment that you'll be making. And as far as, as far as the payment, I think we're going to get into kind of some different parts that go into your mortgage payment. But from the standpoint of what the mortgage is, it's a loan in order to buy a home.
And it's important to note that like there's not a one size fits all strategy. So what may work for even your neighbor, your brother, sister, whatever, may not work for you, which is why it's really important to have a really tight, close relationship to your loan officer so that you can make sure that you're doing what's best for you financially. Again, we're going to talk short-term and long-term goals. That's really what we're here for, to make sure that you are hitting those goals and really finding something that puts you up and sets you up for years to come.
Because for a lot of people, most of the time, the most similar experience that they had was buying a car. And a lot of times you find the car and then you figure out the financing, and it's pretty straightforward. With a mortgage, because it is dealing with more of your financial strategy, we're talking about an asset, the house, and we're talking about the liability, the debt. There's a lot at play there. So making sure that you're getting good advice that is customized for your specific situation, that's what we want to be able to focus on.
Yeah, and I think people do good with examples. So, you buy a $400,000 house, you put 5% down, you're providing the 5%, $20,000. The bank is lending you $380, and over the next 30 years, you're going to pay them back that $380. As mortgage advisors, we're going to find you, the best lender, the best program, the best way to structure that loan, because you can do that 1,000 different ways. But the simplicity of it is $380,000 is going to be lent to you from somebody.
Love it. One of the cool parts about the mortgage industry is that it's not a one size fits all. There's so many different programs, and we're going to touch on what we call the big four, and then we'll touch very, very briefly on something that may be like outside of the box. So the most common mortgage program is a conventional loan. And you can do as little as 3% down with a conventional loan if you're a first-time home buyer. And you can buy a primary residence, you can buy a second home or a vacation home, or you can buy an investment property. Now, the remaining programs that we're going to talk about here real quickly, the next most popular one is FHA, but unlike conventional, you can only buy a primary residence with an FHA. Same thing with VA, which makes up about 20% of the market share of all mortgage products. Lastly, we got USDA, which is a final government product. The cool part about USDA is 100% financing. It's only available in what are deemed rural communities and rural areas. But I always tell people that don't let the R word scare you, because a lot of places are considered rural that you may not be thinking it is rural. If you live outside, like for instance, where I live right now, if you go one county over, it's a 15-minute drive to Pensacola Metro. But it is a rural area. But right across the street, you've got a Publix, you've got a Target, you've got all these city amenities, and you're on maybe a acre lot. So it's not rural in the sense that like you can walk off the back porch with a shotgun or whatever you want to do. It is living in a city. So there's a map out there that you can look at. Look at the USDA map and approved zones. You can type in an address if you want to look and see if it's USDA approved and go from there. Lastly, we've got investor programs, which is, I call them like outside the box programs. So you've got like some non-QM options there. And these are ones that they're less common. These programs are less common. So in typically speaking, they're a little bit more expensive, but they fill a need and they fill this void and they fit the need for someone who may have a situation that is not normal per se and does not fit in these other buckets here.
And I think that like for a lot of people, like this might sound like a lot and overwhelming, but that's why you have the mortgage expert. That's why you're working with Rebecca Richardson or Nate Fain or Matt, the mortgage guys, because we're going to guide you through. When you sit across from a financial advisor, they're advising you on what to do with assets and how to invest those, right? We're advising you on how to structure your debt. So we're on the debt side. We've got multiple products. We've got multiple lenders. It might sound really complicated as an overview, but once you dig into your specific scenario, it becomes more clear. You've got FHA, you've got conventional, here's those side by side and what works for you and why.
And I think the biggest takeaway from this as well is just that there are choices. A lot of times talking with somebody who hasn't bought a home before, there are a lot of misconceptions that they, have to have 20% down, or that because they're a first-time home buyer, their only loan option might be FHA. And those are very, very common, kind of messages that get put out there. But in reality, we have this entire, pie that we can pull from, depending on what somebody's looking to do and where they're coming from, to make sure that, again, like Matt said, your debt for the home is structured as a way that it fits what your goals are, versus just kind of, mortgages are not a one size fits all, and this demonstrates that.
And going back a little bit to what Matt said, I mean, if you go through every single one of these programs, the handbook, the underwriting guidelines, they're all about 1,000 pages long. So, and they're all readily available to the public. So you as the home buyer could go and find all this information yourself. I don't know about you. I don't love reading that much. I don't love reading 1,000 pages about mortgage guidelines, and I'm in the actual industry. So again, this is another thing where we are a resource. We're here to educate you, and we are here to take your situation, find out what works best for you, and basically dissect the, I guess, thousands of pages of underwriting guidelines to see what fits your situation. So there's 3 big buckets that we look at when lenders are looking to give you a mortgage. The first one is credit. Do you have the credit score? Do you have the credit history? Do you fit the mold for this particular program? And the minimum credit score that you have to have for this particular program. Next one being income. Do you have enough income to repay that loan? Can you prove your income? Last one being money. Do you have enough money for closing costs? Any maybe down payment you may have? Could you possibly get a gift for that money that you may need for closing costs or down payment? I call this CIA, credit income assets. And a lot of people, they kind of laugh at that because they feel like they're talking to CIA when they're talking to us, because we are diving deep into every single page of your financial history. But a lot of people, I think what I tell people is, like, try not to get emotional about that and try not to take it personally, because we are trying to see what is on paper and seeing how it may fit in a highly, highly regulated space that we are in, and that's the mortgage world.
And then one of the things that I tell people too, from this perspective, is I describe it as being kind of like a 3-legged stool, right? So when we're looking at a loan program, there's certain minimums, whether it's minimum down payment, minimum credit score, things like that. Sometimes, a lot of times, one of those legs of the stool might be short, right? So maybe you don't have a down payment, but your credit's solid and job is good and all that kind of thing. So sometimes that looks like, what extra kind of subset of those loan programs, or what other options do we have to make up that shortage, to make sure that all of those criteria are being met? Because we do have to look at each of these things truly almost kind of in their own, basically their own silo, right? So a lot of times, maybe having a lot of income doesn't necessarily overcome a credit score if there's a minimum credit score for a program. So we have to look at all of them together and both separately, and then that will direct the advice that we're giving back to you on the loan types and next steps, and how everything will basically go from there.
Yeah, I think a misconception is that, you need perfect credit, 200,000 a year in income, and 20% down. Certainly not the case. There's low down and no down programs. There's programs where you might have not as much income, but you're able to qualify for what you're looking for. You might have a 536 credit score, and there's an FHA program where, like Rebecca said, you're going to have the other 2 parts of the stool really strong. Good income and 10% plus down for that FHA program. But another reason why you're going to have a guide guiding you, and figuring out which type of programs are available to you based on how strong you are in each one of these areas.
Let's break down what a credit score is. And we, of course, are going to be talking FICO score. So a FICO score, the FICO model, there's different kinds of scoring models. So lenders use what are called a FICO score. There's different models of the FICO score, but we'll just talk FICO. And that score is a way that we have numerically labeled how well you are at handling debt, paying back debt, and sometimes handling your overall finances. So your credit score is kind of like the first checkpoint. I call that like the first hurdle. Once we find out what your credit score is, then we can move on, and we can start peeling back the onion and finding out, okay, well, now let's get to the next step and see which program is right for you based on your credit score.
And so to piggyback on that, one of the things that we run into a lot is people will say, "Oh, this is my Credit Karma score, or this is my Credit Sesame, or this is what my credit card, gives me." And like Nate said, there are multiple versions of your credit score. And for lenders, there are some set versions of the credit score that we have to use, which a lot of times the scores that we as consumers, can access via free sites or even sometimes paid sites or through our bank. So it's very important to understand that those are great for tracking your credit history and kind of your overall credit trends, but the score that we pull might be different. And the way that I describe to people is it's kind of like how there's Coke, Pepsi, and there's your grocery store cola. All of them are cola or soda or whatever you call in your region, but all of them are that, but everybody has their preference because there are some differences. And then kind of going beyond the score, then we're looking at the credit history as well. That kind of behind the scenes or that next layer of what actually generated that score. So if you want to kind of talk about credit history and where that plays in, Matt.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, the details of the credit report can also come into play, right? So we're going to pull a mortgage specific credit report, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. So you're going to have, 3 credit scores. And like, you guys have said, it's your relationship with debt. Have you paid your payments on time? If you have $10,000 in available credit, are you using $9,998 of it? Or are you utilizing less of it? And then it spits out, 660, 705, whatever the credit scores are. And we take the middle one. You're also going to have, details on that credit report. We've lived through some financial crisis where people have, foreclosures and bankruptcies and other things on their credit report. These are not necessarily going to disqualify you from having a mortgage, but these details will be taken into consideration from the lender. Certain number of years for this program, certain number of years for that program. So it all plays into it, as you would expect. Somebody's lending you hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy a home. They want to see what you've done with, handling debt in the past.
Well, and I think it's important to understand too that just because you may not want to buy a house right now, let's say you're 3 years from wanting to buy a house, it is never too early to start working on your credit. So what you do now in developing that credit history and that good credit history can help you infinitely. It can help you get approved for more. It can help your mortgage transaction go smoother. It can help you get a better interest rate if you get a better credit score. So even if you're 3, 4, 5 years away from wanting to buy a house, go ahead and start working on your credit score. I think at the end of this slideshow, we'll give you a couple of resources for that. If you are fairly new to credit, if you need some credit advice, some credit tips, we'll hook you up with some folks that you need to follow on social media.
Yeah, and actually on FICO's website, I think it's just the same, my FICO website. You don't have to sign up for their credit monitoring, though you can. But even directly on the FICO site, there's a great walkthrough of just simple credit basics, because we can say all day long, get your credit score better, but then it's like, okay, but what do I actually have to do? So understanding kind of the math behind that goes into generating that score. How much is your payment history? How much is, like Matt said, how much can you borrow versus how much you owe? All of that factors, and there's some fantastic free resources out there. Plus we'll share some.
So we touched briefly on credit history. In this next slide, it gives you some examples of how different activities and different events can affect your credit score. So let's say 10 years ago, you took out some student loans and you've got some student loan debt. We see that a lot, that a lot of borrowers, a lot of our clients, their first introduction to the credit world and credit history is student loans. So, the natural progression for a lot of people is go ahead and get student loans while you are in school. You might then get a credit card afterwards, or while you're in school, you might get a car. These are all very early credit events that are the most common. But as we touched on earlier, the earlier that you can establish that credit history, the more depth you have to your credit history. So the more leeway that you have that if something does happen that has a negative impact, if you've got a longer credit history, it can affect it even less, which is why starting and maintaining your credit history is so important, even if you are not wanting to buy a house right now, even if it's years from now.
And that's why it matters so much, is because 35% of your score does come from credit history. So the more history that you have that can be scored, the more data there is. And that, think about it kind of like if you had, some white paint and you put let's say you have a gallon of white paint and you put 1 drop of red paint into it. That's going to have less of an impact versus if you have a pint of white paint and you put a drop of paint into it. So the more history that you have, the better that it can impact against any kind of, things that could come up, because, things happen. Sometimes banking information changes and you have a late payment. That is not the end of the world, and it does not mean that you can't get a mortgage. And then if you are in the process of establishing credit, understanding, like I said, from some of the resources that we'll share, the way to build credit in a very smart and safe way, because a lot of people are scared of debt, that it's going to be a runaway thing and all of that. But understanding how to manage it well will help you, because having a low score gets very expensive. And the more time that you have to make some of those changes, you can see some pretty significant increases with enough time to buy a home. And that's also why it's good to start now, so you can have this information. You don't have to make those changes kind of last minute because you're, looking at a lease ending in 60 days or something like that.
Man, I love that paint analogy. That's pretty cool.
Love that.
I think you guys both mentioned it, and the only thing that I want to triple stamp here for everybody is that, your credit score and your credit history, how you treat credit, is important, because if you get a car loan that's got a 23% interest rate or an 8% interest rate, it matters, right? It matters hundreds of dollars per month. If you go out and get a mortgage and you get a 5.99 versus a 6.5, that's also hundreds of dollars per month extra. The lender's going to charge you more with a lower credit score because it's seen as higher risk to them. So the sooner you can get in front of this and really start to understand what levers you need to pull to have a strong credit history and high credit score, the better off you are, because when you do borrow money, it's going to be at a cheaper rate.
Sure. Credit requirements for different programs. So we touched on this briefly, but conventional minimum credit score is 620. One cool thing about the VA loan is there's actually not a minimum credit score. Now, don't think that you can go in with a 375 credit score like, oh, I can buy a house there, because we're going back to that stool analogy. So we're going to have some support, so to speak, on those other two legs, so that we can overcome the challenge that you have with your credit score, if your credit score is low, something like that. Same thing with FHA. So when you get, is it below 580? You have to put more money down? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just testing y'all. I knew that. Under 580. So normally you can put as little as 3.5% down on an FHA loan. Once you get under 580, you've got to do a bigger down payment. Same thing, Matt touched on this earlier. We all touched on this earlier. The lower your credit score is, a lot of these products, the higher you're going to pay in interest. The higher you pay in interest, the less house that you can afford to buy. So your buying power is limited by that as well, which is why it's like, we're going to beat a dead horse, but like, it's really, really important that you get that credit score right, so that you can have a better probability of buying the house that you actually want to buy, and having the numbers work so that you can also afford that house.
I want to connect some dots on the credit piece, because a lot of times, we're talking about start early and things like that. And then also that the score that we see is going to be different than the score that, that as consumers, again, that we can pull and on ourselves. So one thing that I like to let people know is, to get all of that connected together, it is okay to talk to a lender early in the process. A lot of people feel like you have to have a perfectly put together plan, or know what you want to buy and where you want to buy and how much you want to put down and all that kind of stuff. And it's not like that. Again, kind of coming back to the, analogy of the Rubik's Cube, it's a whole bunch of kind of mixed up information, and it's our job to help put it in order in the way that then progresses towards moving home. So if that's 6 months or even a year prior to when you think you want to buy, it's not a bad idea to connect with the lender and just say, this is what I think I want to do. Am I on the right path? Because the more time that you have on that path or on that runway, you can make adjustments that are less drastic, right? You're not having to make big steps on your credit to get your score where it needs to be. You can make some more minor ones that are a little bit easier to adapt and put into play. And to kind of round that out, the next thing that a lot of clients or first-time home buyers are concerned about is, right, but if I'm working on my credit, but I want these answers from a lender, I don't want to pull my credit because that's going to hurt my score. There are two ways that we can look at your credit. If it's a hard pull or a hard inquiry, which most people are familiar with, most of the time that has a 5-point or less impact on your score, and that comes directly from FICO. Most of the time it's less though. or we can do what's called a soft inquiry. And that just means where we can still look at the credit history, we can get a sense of where everything stands. It limits a little bit what we can do on our side and kind of the depth that we can go into. But we are going to be able to give you some actionable information and again, confirm that you're on the right path or any steps that maybe you need to take.
Well, and I liken it to, and I don't know how y'all present this. I present it very similarly to Rebecca. So I tell people, once you go and sign your lease, and you know, like, man, I do not want to rent next year. Like, this is my last lease. I'm gonna buy a house next year. I tell people, once we get that lease signed, let's go ahead and set up an appointment. Let's go ahead and talk. Let's make a plan for the next year so that you're not calling me 90 days from when your lease is up or 2 months from when your lease is up. Like, hey, I'm up against this lease expiring. I don't know if I'm going to be able to renew it and go month to month, but I really want to buy a house. It's the same thing that Rebecca just said, in the sense that, like, you having that whole year to make that plan and get ready for homeownership is it's so much easier to do it when you have a whole year to do that versus maybe 60 days, maybe a couple of weeks. That's one of the most heartbreaking phone calls that I get and have to make, is when someone says, hey, my landlord's not going to renew my lease and he or she wants to put it on the market, and I'm not really sure what I can do, and I pull their credit and I run it through everything else, and it's like there's no real solution for you to buy a home right now. If I had known that, a year in advance, we could have made a plan. I tell them, your score is going to go down 2 to 5 points probably when I do a hard inquiry, but it's so worth it because the information that I can give you will help get that score up way more than five points in most situations. Plus, you're going to be ready. Like, that little 5-point hit, you will make up for in the next 12 months. It is so much worth it to do that, so that you're working with real actual data, and I can give you the best advice so that you are ready once that lease gets ready to expire about a year later.
Exactly.
Matt, why is this important?
I think this is important, for a number of reasons. This slide talks about generational wealth. We all are home ownership advocates for a number of reasons, and I work with investors who are building real generational wealth, millions of dollars, right? And there's, like, there's no real secret, right, that anybody has to uncover. If you own real estate over time, real estate appreciates, and the debt that you owe to the bank as you pay it off goes down, right? And so, like, that creates wealth. It's really a simple concept, and there's millions of people that have created generational wealth and millions and billions of dollars through real estate. So, like, the cat's out of the bag, right? Like, real estate is a wealth builder. Almost everybody who holds a great deal of wealth has, at least as a portion of their assets, real estate. And so for that reason, I'm a big advocate of it, because you don't have to be Warren Buffett to own it, right? Somebody who's making $42,000 a year and has a 627 credit score can go out there and put 3.5% down and buy their first home, right? And that home is going to appreciate, and they're going to pay the debt down just like an institutional investor or a hedge fund is going to do.
Well, and let me touch on this slide real quick, and then I want Rebecca's thoughts. So this is showing the median, it's the average sales price of a home in 1940, a little over $30,000. Pretty hard to find something priced like that right now in today's market, depending on where you're at. 1980, just shy of $95,000. We're still under $100,000 for the average household, the average house price. Fast forward to 2021, we've now quadrupled. We are over 400,000 for an average sales price. So let's just say, theoretically, I mean, I know my parents have owned the house that I grew up in. They've owned it since in the early 90s. I have no idea what they bought it for versus how much it's worth now, but that's a wealth builder. That's a huge deal. And I get a big kick out of helping first-time home buyers buy a home, because I know what's about to happen in their lives. I get excited about that. But now that I'm 10 years into this process, I'm starting to have a bunch of repeat clients. So I've got clients that I helped buy their first home. And what's been really cool, like, even more fulfilling is when those clients then have started calling me back and they're saying, hey, like, I've got all this equity. Like, what can we do with this? Should I sell? Should I borrow against it? And it's really cool because I remember, flashback 4 or 5 years when I helped them and they had $4,000 or $5,000 to their name. Now all of a sudden they've got this asset that they've got 6 figures worth of equity in. And that right there is like the next step, and something that I'm really getting a lot of fulfillment out of right now is having those conversations that it's a really small chance that they could have built wealth any other way because of their finances, because of their job, because of whatever. Like the numbers weren't, it was going to be really hard for them to get to that net worth any other way other than investing in themselves, investing in some kind of real estate.
And part of the reason that is so powerful is that, we all need and want somewhere to live, right? And for most personal budgets, what you spend on housing is one of your biggest ticket items. So you might as well take that money and do that work for you a little bit over time, absolutely, then compounds and has a better, bigger impact. But I think as we're all experiencing inflation, it can be very nerve-wracking to see some of those big ticket items of our budget go up outside of our control. And that's unfortunately when you're renting, you're at the whims of how rent can change. And that's not saying that, because you rent, it's bad. I'm not saying that. I know sometimes people kind of get out here and say, you have to buy. And if you don't buy, then that's not what we're about. But just saying from the standpoint of, it can be, it can seem risky to sometimes look at the market and think, oh gosh, what is it going to do and all this kind of stuff. But Matt made it very simple. It is truly, it's your debt will go down over time. Even yes, after 2008, home values do go up. And so that creates wealth with dollars that you're going to be spending anyway. You're going to be paying somebody's mortgage, whether it's yours or your landlord's. It might make as much sense to pay it yours so that money works for you.
I think it's playing a dangerous game. It's a game that a lot of people have been playing lately, and understandably so. They don't want to get caught on the wrong side of a bubble. So, but the problem with that is people, you can listen to a plethora of experts, and they have said for years. I mean, I remember dating all the way back until 2017 that this thing was supposed to crash. But by and large, let's say that even if you bought, I'm 35 years old, okay? I don't care what the value of my 401k is right now because I'm not retiring tomorrow. It's the same thing with the value of your house in the sense that I don't really worry about that right now because, like Rebecca said, I have to live somewhere. And if you're buying anything for the short term, whether that be stocks, whether that be real estate, the sooner you plan on selling it and hopefully making a profit, the more risky it is. So know that going in, if I bought this house that I remember when I bought my last house, I told my wife, this was in 2018. Again, I thought that we were getting close to the top of the market at that time. There were a bunch of talking heads out there saying that. Obviously we didn't. But I remember telling my wife, I said, we might be buying this near the top, but this is in a location that I like. This is that we like. I let her have a say in it. And
Generous of you, Nate.
This is the monthly payment that's very affordable for me. So it checked the boxes. It's something our family could grow into. It's something that it was a house that it was in the right school district. So, I mean, theoretically, I could own this house and live in this house for the rest of my life. I don't necessarily want to, but my risk has gone down, and my risk was gone down because I bought for the long term. I bought with the intention of holding it for about 10, maybe how many years I was planning on holding it. And now I'm on year 4, year 5. I've still got, 5 years to go on that plan, but I've put myself in a position to where I gave myself a shot of, if the market does go up, now I do have options.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, real estate truly is the long play, right? And it's over time, it always wins. If you're buying something and you plan to relocate in a year, it might be a different conversation. And home ownership advocates like us might even say that would be a time when you might want to rent, right? If you're going to move out of state within a year from now. But to your point, and to give somebody an example, in 2006, people might have said, don't buy, don't buy, don't buy. I bought a house in the neighborhood I grew up in. I knew I was going to hold it long term. It didn't matter if it was worth more, less, the same. The next year, the year after that, I owned that house in 2022. in 2009, my neighbors were probably selling at a heavy discount to what I paid in 2006. But that 345 purchase in 2006, it's gone up, it's gone down. I haven't really looked at what it's done. It's now a rental property. The tenants pay the mortgage. So $5,000 or $6,000 a month gets taken off of what I owe. It's worth $550-ish or so. So it's $200,000 in equity. In another 10 years, it's going to be paid off and I'll owe zero and I'll be getting income from it, right? And so real estate, like as a long-term wealth play, I'm not going to say that it can't lose, right? But it's one of those things that like it's been proven, right? That it's a wealth builder, and if you just like Warren Buffett doesn't trade stocks and day trade, right? He's in it for the long term.
Yeah, I mean, if we're day trading houses, that you're a flipper. You know what I mean? Like, I don't really do that because I don't have an appetite for that kind of risk. So I know some people do. That's great for them, but I like to buy stuff for the long term. If the value goes up or something happens in the market to where it works in my favor, that's just icing on the cake. We've talked about this a lot, but according to the Federal Reserve, the average net worth of a homeowner versus a renter is 40 times. So a homeowner has a net worth that is 40 times greater than the average renter, according to the Federal Reserve. And not all of that is just in the actual real estate, because that's the natural reaction. Like, well, of course, like we've got some equity there. But something that a lot of people are learning with the recent uptick in interest rates and property values is that something that's even more valuable sometimes is the cash flow aspect of it. So from a monthly standpoint, my house payment from 2018 that I bought in 2018, my house payment's gone down. Like, who can say that about their rent? Who can say that about like a possible truck payment or car payment or anything like that? But my house payment, my biggest expense on a monthly basis, has gone down since 2018 because I was able to refinance at a lower rate. And that has helped me build wealth as well, because now I have more money at the end of the month.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point too. And I think that's why the slide shows other wealth, right? Because, as hard as it is to believe in my market, there's people with $1,200, $1,400 mortgage payments because they've been in that house. And when you've got a fixed rate, 30-year fixed rate loan, like your payment's not going to change depending on the state. And, there might be some adjustments to property tax and whatnot, but like year over year rent growth of 6, 8, 10%, you might be renting something today that's $2,000 a month. And if something equal is a $2,000 housing payment, you'd be surprised what that rent payment's going to look like in a decade, right? Like, do you want to pay $3,200 in a decade from now, or do you want to have a housing payment that's stable? So yeah, it's going to allow you to have that extra $1,000 a decade from now that goes into a retirement account or goes into other investments.
So what are some actionable items that you can take right now, whether you are 1 month away from buying a house or 2 years away from buying a house? One of the most important things that we've talked about is get your credit right. Start working on your credit. Learn how to manage your money. So, I mean, if you can't manage $100, you'll never be able to manage $100,000. So it's all at scale, right? So really get your budget dialed in, understand and learn how money works, understand, really take some inventory and ask yourself, where am I going to be in my career in the next couple, 3 years? Like, what does my income potential look like in the next couple, 3 years versus where my bills are right now, and see if you can get those two to align. Pay your bills on time as much as possible. That's going to help with so much, most namely your credit score. Opening a credit card is something that a lot of people will freak out about. But if I liken a credit card to a firearm. If you know how to use a firearm, it can be a very important and good tool in certain situations. It's the same thing with a credit card. If you open one and you know how to use it, it can be an incredible tool. Just like a firearm, if you don't know how to use it, if you don't know how to use a credit card, either one of those things could be very detrimental and be very bad. So if you open a credit card, make sure you're using it sparingly, but you are active with it. So there's two different thresholds that a lot of us talk about. The first one is being under 30% of whatever your limit is. So keeping that balance below 30% of whatever your limit is. for easy math, since Matt and I went to public school, we're going to do $1,000 credit limit. Rebecca, you went to public school too? I just
Yeah.
assumed. If we did $1,000 credit limit and we kept it under, and our goal is to keep it under 30%, then we don't want that credit card balance to get over $300 that month. Once we get above that 30% threshold, that's when the credit score starts to go down a little bit, starts to get hurt for most people. So that 30% threshold is an important one. If you get below 10%, if you keep it below 10%, that's when you're really going to start to see some exponential growth for your credit score and the power that that credit card has. What I like to tell people is go get a credit card, buy something that you are planning on buying anyway. So for me, like, I have to buy fuel for my truck. I have to buy gas. So I use my credit card for gas. I have now learned how to use credit cards in the last decade or so. So I use it for more than that, but starting out, all I did was pump gas with it. That's all I did. Also, I did that because I didn't want any kind of scammers or skimmers or whatever they're called. I didn't want them playing with my money in my checking account. I wanted them playing with the credit card company's money. If someone goes and they hack a credit card system, I don't want them to take money out of my bank account. I want them to go start messing with this credit card, because it will get sorted out. But having $10,000 disappear out of your checking account versus having $10,000 racked up on a credit card, two very different vibes. Y'all can see this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that too, that there's a lot of education online. A couple things that come to mind, you know, the mortgage mentor, Rebecca on TikTok, you know, the mortgage creator, Nate Fain on TikTok. There's a lot of information where, like, if you want to get fit, you start following fitness folks. If you want to buy a house, you can start following, you know, there's no, you know, too early of a time. And to Nate's point, right? Like, maybe it's a year out and you put together a game plan. All right, you start thinking about these things, you start studying these things. We live in a great age in 2022 where there's information online. Not all of it is great, right? But if you've got somebody like, you know, the two that I'm grateful to join today, who are putting out educational content to help consumers, you can start to learn to where this home buying process becomes less scary. I think for a lot of people, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, having a mortgage payment, like, these things can sound like a big deal. The more you get educated about it, the less scary it becomes. So go out there and learn about mortgage as a whole. And then, like Nate said, your specific scenario. You know, you might go through the pre-approval process, get your credit score run, and then have a true advisor tell you, guess what? You're ready. Here's what you'd be approved for. Here's what it looks like. Or you're not ready. Here's a game plan. Here's things you can do to improve credit. Here's a savings goal, and all those other things that are going to prepare you for home ownership and for buying a house in the future.
So how can you hit your goal? We talked about working on your credit score, saving for your down payment. That's assuming that you are working with a program that needs a down payment. It doesn't always hurt to have a little extra jingle in your pocket, but start saving. Learn how to really balance your money, how to balance your checkbook. That's boomer energy, but, like, learn how that money and that monthly in and out works.
Understand how to work your Mint app. How about that, Nate?
Oh, I like that.
Shout out. Shout out for Mint.
And then, you know, get pre-approved earlier than not. We've gone over this a couple of times. It keeps the surprise, it keeps the drama out of it. Nobody likes some extra surprises and excitement in the home buying process. That's not what we like to do. That's not what creates a good customer experience. That I don't want you to look back on your mortgage transaction or anything like, man, like, I did not see any of this coming. Like, that tells me that you rushed it a little bit, or you linked up with the wrong loan originator. Really having someone that is not afraid to set up the proper expectations for you, mentally and just emotionally, like, that will help you more than you will know.
Mm-hmm.
Who to follow? As Matt said, oh, Matt, you are not on this slide, brother. I should have, you know.
It's all right. People know Matt the Mortgage Guy across all
Yeah.
the socials. If you search Matt the Mortgage Guy, you're going to find me.
So honestly, between the three of us, if y'all go follow us on all platforms, then you should have no mortgage questions ever. So this can be our last presentation. Y'all just go follow all three of us. But no, I mean, myself, Matt, Rebecca, one of our teammates, Ariel, we do a lot of not just real estate stuff. We also, you know, we talk about a little bit of credit. We talk about all those wealth building activities. We give you some insights and some updates in some real estate news and some updates in the mortgage industry. Don't think that even if you are not ready to buy a house right now, you still should probably go follow us if you think that that's something that's in the cards for you in the future. And then Alyssa, she is awesome when it comes to credit. I've got her on there. I've followed her for what, 2 years, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable at explaining credit and breaking down credit. She goes live a lot. She does a great job. I mean, I've learned stuff from her.
Absolutely.
Because like we know a lot about credit, but there are still credit experts out there that somehow know more than we do, and Alyssa's a perfect example of that. Lastly, and this was my list when I did this presentation earlier, so I guess Matt and I were like fighting or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I didn't make the cut.
You didn't make the cut, right?
Your alter ego wasn't vibing with me, I guess.
Exactly. So Gina, Rebecca and I know Gina well. She does a great job of giving really practical advice on how to save and cut corners and cut some pennies and turning pennies into dimes and dimes into quarters.
And part of that is because from the standpoint of the reason that we gave Gina a plug is it's easy for us to say all day long, hey, just save for your down payment. And you're like, that's cool, but my rent's gone up. And I don't know if you're aware, but there's inflation. And so what does all of this mean? Being aware of that, we just wanted to share what some of the tips that we've shared with clients or some of the resources that we've shared with clients to give you some of those tips to how do you carve some off of your grocery budget so you can start putting a couple $100s a month aside, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll speak for all of us and anybody out there who's putting out content to help homeowners. It's really like, you know, our mission to help empower folks to get in a home, because we talked about wealth building. It's also, you know, stability for your family. There's something about, you know, turning the key in a home that is your own that just hits different. That's what the kids say, I think, right? Hits different. And
yes, Matt, it's lit.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, it's magic to be a part of that and for people to entrust us with that home buying process. So, you know, we're out here trying to educate folks as much as possible. To a lot of people, it seems like a humongous mountain, but I promise you, with a little bit of work, it's possible for just about anybody out there. You might need to put in, you know, some work and some effort and some energy, and you might, you know, take a year to get prepared by, you know, building up a savings account and credit. But, you know, ideally, you know, we'd be able to empower anybody, you know, through education on how to buy a home and get as many people into homes as possible.
And my parting words would be, in the last 2 months, I've helped a 55-year-old first-time home buyer and a 60-year-old first-time home buyer. So it is never too late. It is a lot like the concept of compounding interest, where if you follow any kind of financial gurus or you know anybody that you know they give investment advice and fundamentals out there, they say the sooner you can start, the better. That's not in the cards for everybody, and I get that. I still, you know, like appreciate that. I appreciate that everybody's on their own journey, but even if you're 40, 50 years old, I mean, these folks that I helped that were 55, 60 years old, it was a lifelong dream that I helped, like I helped it come true for them. So just because, you know, maybe you're in your mid 20s and all of your friends are starting to settle down, some of them are buying houses, some of them are not. Go at your own pace, but understand and arm yourself with the knowledge so that you know, like, am I being complacent, or am I actually going at my own pace and acting my wage and really doing what's smart for me in this moment financially? If you have any questions, feel free to drop it in. We don't have any right now, but if you have any, like, drop it in the comment section. We're going to repost this on YouTube. Feel free to reach out to any of us and we will get back to y'all. Someone will reach out to you. And that's all I got, guys. Y'all have any more parting words?
Good to spend time with you.
Yep, pleasure chatting. Thanks, guys.
As always, we'll see y'all later.